Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of the Influence Continuum, and I'm delighted to have a fellow therapist with me, Esther Friedman, on the show with me. Esther has a book. We can see it for those of you who are looking at the video. It's called The Gentle Soul's Revolution, and the subtitle is A Secret Cult, an Open Rebellion, and Lessons in Protecting and Honoring Your Gentle Soul. I love that. You're cool.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. So I'm going to just read a little more of your bio. Esther is a licensed mental health counselor, expressive art therapist, songwriter, author, and former cult member. In 2006, a new friend, in air quotes, introduced her to a, quote, esoteric school, unquote, and 15 years later, she left the secret cult. She didn't recognize the, quote, school, unquote, as a cult until she started researching cults obsessively. Then she posted a blog called Cult Confessions, soon a CD of 10 original songs, also called Cult Confessions, followed. And you're an artist, so of course you're going to be wanting to use your soul and your creative talents to help yourself heal and help others. So I'm just going to read a few more things. You know, every time you refused to keep the cult secret, you felt better. So that was self-reinforcing. This is and I felt the same way and feel the same way. So she started what she called an edutainment campaign, which I love, and igotout.org. I will mention as well that I'm a collaborating co-founder of, presenting her misadventure to private audiences. And she realized that releasing secrets freed her voice and her mind. So I'm going to stop there, but just say you have quite an interesting story. You were not recruited at 19. You were a little bit older. And I just want to say the Gurdjieff, inspired cult that you got sucked into, I was actually kind of recruited into that by my next door neighbor as a child.
Really?
And I read In Search of the Miraculous and all of the Gurdjieff books before I met the Moonies. And so it was actually Ouspensky's book that I looked at that I misinterpreted as a spiritual revelation that I should follow the Moonies because Gurdjieff was already dead. That's a little bit of my story. But over the decades, I've met many people in Gurdjieff-related cult groups and done deep dives just to unpack my own belief system. But I'm very interested in hearing your story and what you would like to share, and especially what you've learned about helping people heal. So with that, Esther Friedman, thank you for being on the Influence Continuum podcast.
I'm so fascinated that the Gurdjieff stuff primed you for the Moonies. Wow. I had never heard of Gurdjieff. And you're right, my story is unusual in that I was 41 when I stumbled into this, or was, I should say, groomed into it, baited into it. Yeah, I think I'm a little stunned that you had that experience, the Gurdjieff experience first.
I'm sorry you didn't know that. I wrote about it in Combating, but you probably looked at that decades ago or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I was reading Plato and utopian novels as a young boy. I was just fascinated to think about there must be more to life than what I'm seeing. And it's a cult that deliberately tries to say you're not ready yet, or you go to a bookstore and there's a little thing, and then they want you to be tantalized, and they just tease you because it's so special, air quotes. And you're not awake yet, and you're sleeping, and like, what do you mean by that? These are loaded words. We learned that about cult mind control. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah. So just to give you a little the, the short version. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if this was a typo on what I sent you or not, but it was 5 years, not 15. Thank God.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It said 2006 you met the group, and 2011 you left.
Yeah,
So
that was a typo. My
typo.
bad.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glad you weren't in that long. So how
yeah.
many years were you
Five
involved?
5 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
long enough.
It's long. It's like 4 years too long.
Yes.
Probably 1 year too long, but yeah. So let's just say, Steve, that I was not adulting well, and adulthood was difficult up until that point, and it was kind of me floating around thinking, why can't I figure anything out? Nothing's working, blah, blah, blah. Right before, kind of like you, no, actually, you had a breakup before. I was on the precipice of a breakup when I'm at Whole Foods, and this woman starts talking to me. And mind you, she's with her husband and her 2 kids. And she's friendly and engaging, and I find out she's an artist like me. And we walk out to the parking lot together, and she says, we should really get together. Let's exchange phone numbers. So we did. And what's, I guess, interesting about this group, I don't know, honestly, I haven't heard of other cults doing this exact thing, but it probably does happen. You know, we had a friendship, right, for months, many months before she even brought up a group. So gained my trust. I thought she was a little weird because she was very private. While I'm like pouring out my soul, telling her like all my problems, blah, blah, blah. And then I think this is very funny that I actually said to her, is this all there is? Because it's so stereotypical and classic. And you can imagine that it was like bing at that moment. And she said, would you like to meet other people who ponder these questions? And then introduced me to other friends. In this group, as you know, because you've worked with people who have left, it's all about secrecy. It's not like Scientology. They hand out pamphlets on the commons. School does not do that. It's like we are the invisible world, and we're protecting these ideas. By the way, Gurdjieff was not mentioned at any point in my 5 years.
Seriously. So interesting.
No, they just,
they just stole his ideology and used it, and they repackaged it.
Yeah.
So interesting. If I may comment, Esther, just back to your initial recruitment is a pattern I would like to highlight, which is you meet somebody, they're very friendly, they initiate, but you wind up disclosing everything, but you know nothing about them. And that lack of reciprocity needs to be a red flag for everybody. That if you're sharing this much, they need to share this much. And if not, like cut and run because there's something wrong.
For sure. Yeah. That imbalance should have been a screaming siren.
Well, hopefully people will be listening to this and go, aha, okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can make new friends at Whole Foods or wherever, and they're friendly. But again, you're sharing something personal. You want to have an equal personal share. And if there isn't, it's a big warning flag.
If I may, there's one other thing that's a big warning flag. I could never get her on the phone. She never picked up her phone. So 2 years into my misadventure, as I like to call it, when I'm being recruited to make new friends, as they called it.
Right.
They said, get a voicemail box. So suddenly I was like, oh, that's why Lisa never picked up her phone. So if that is a one-way street, that is also a red flag.
Yeah, Frederick Lenz, so-called Rama, used to make all of the followers have a voicemail box and a P.O. box only. Also. So please continue.
Okay. So yeah, we are having a friendship for several months. Then, do you want to meet new friends? Then there was a next step in which she had me meet her for coffee to meet another friend, which was really the leader of the cult. I was being vetted. So the whole time this is going on, I have no idea. Like, most people don't walk through life wondering, is this new friend keeping a file on me? And, you know, again, it's kind of funny in that it's so absurd. But when I met Robert, he brought up ideas that really specifically, kind of drilled into my problems, right? Like I'm floating around in this world feeling like I don't belong in it. And he comes in with an origin story. We are essence from the starry world and we're here to learn something. And we really don't belong here. So,
Validates the feeling.
He validates the feeling. And, after I left, I realized, oh, he did that because Lisa told him. New friend told him that I was walking around going, I don't feel like I belong here, So red flag.
Yep. So Lifton called that mystical manipulation,
Yes.
where the recruiter is getting all this detail about you, feeding it to the leader's meeting you and acting as if they can read your mind and know exactly, what you're about, and reel you in with that information.
Yes, that was mystical manipulation.
Yep.
So we have coffee with Robert. Robert decides that I'm worthy, I guess. And he says, would you like to try a free 5-week experiment, which also should have been a red flag. And I was like, sure,
Mm-hmm.
Couple months after that, Lisa tells me, oh, this new class is starting. Again, red flag. She doesn't give me an address. She says, meet me at the Whole Foods. I follow her like a couple miles down the road to a Lions Club. And, I will say, Steve, that the entire time, I didn't lose touch with my cognitive dissonance. Like I had an inner skeptic who was going, hello, what is going on? Why didn't you give me an address?
Right.
And I kept pushing that aside, and that's what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all I can say is that you're made to feel like you're special, but are you worthy to have this really deep knowledge that's only a few people on planet Earth have, where, you can actually evolve yourself and nobody else can.
Yeah, it's really a setup, isn't it?
Well, it's very alluring, and for young people and even for middle-aged people, the notion that there is a bigger story of meaning for us individually, and how we connect to reality. And again, you don't know what you don't know, and so I guess, when you said I had this cognitive dissonance, I think everybody has their real self that's still there. In my case, it was drilled out of me, and also I was just totally sleep deprived because I didn't live separately. In your cult, you live separately, you have a life, you can work, etc. It's a different experience, but they still climb into your head.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because, you would think that having my own life outside of the group would have thwarted it to some degree, and maybe it did. And I often refer facetiously to my experience as cult light because, I wasn't living on a compound. In fact, part of the thing with this secret, or private school, as I like to call it, was that we were to have normal lives. We were to be working in the world. That the world was our experiment. It was, all the world's a stage. And Shakespeare was big in that group.
Right.
Everything was about Shakespeare, So, and yet the impact and the influence went really deep. 5 years. And, yes, the love bombing in the beginning, that felt pretty great, but it stopped at a certain point.
Oh, yeah. And then you're encouraged to recruit others at a certain point, of course. But describe, were you meeting like once a week on the weekends or twice, Tuesdays and Thursdays, but you couldn't tell anybody because you were...
Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you couldn't tell anybody.
Yeah, I've counseled a few from that, from your group, actually.
Yes, yeah. I'm sure that you have. Oddly enough, I start going to the class and I'm all excited about the ideas and the community and, we're going to save the world. Although that was more tacit. Again, that's not like Scientology. It's not stated overtly, And a couple of months later, I meet my husband and we start dating. And then I get a job and then I'm like, oh my God, well, life is working. It must be because of school, right? Like I totally credit the group for that.
Well, I think they told you that, like maybe not overtly, but they definitely implied. Yeah. And anything that's good that happens is the group, and anything bad is you're not practicing enough. You're not awake enough.
Yeah, you're not trying hard enough.
Right.
You cannot win for losing. You're never going to try hard enough.
Right.
But if something good happens, in fact, so my husband, Chris, and I got married in 2009, and they had like a champagne toast for me. And I can remember Robert taking credit. You have come so far. I remember when we first met, and now you're getting married. So, yeah. So I think the bullet points that are important are that I gave, and I was buying into the credit, of anything good happening in my life, in the group. And then the way this group works their isolation, because every cult isolates and brings on the us them, is what this crazy Christmas party that they have every year, which you probably heard about if you counseled people from this group.
And I think you have to do a play, or you have to do some,
oh my gosh, performances, make a dinner, build decorations.
Right. A lot of slave labor, sleep deprivation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that is sewn into every holiday season. Of course, you are not told that this thing you are doing is going to rinse and repeat every year.
I love that. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah. I can remember the first year that actually it really was like grade school. I think it's kind of funny that they called themselves school, but because it was fun and I got to be creative and I got to draw and paint and sing and perform and all of that. It was like mom and dad are coming and we're going to perform for them. And then... But
the performances were just for members, not for mom and dad or anybody outside,
Right. It's this kind of self-congratulatory, look at us, aren't we great? Aren't we creative? Aren't we brilliant? Thing that every year gets a little more strenuous. Every year takes a little more time. Every year becomes really important to your development. It's the time at which you get the most out of the group. So every year, of course, people are fighting with their families and spouses. I was no exception to that. So they're hijacking the holiday season. And then after a few years of that, it's like, oh, and by the way, we want you to go out and make new friends. So it's a slow boil.
Yep. And so you met your husband in the cult, so you didn't have to keep it a secret from
That's a little complicated. He was not in the cult. He never was in the cult. And actually, he's somebody that I had known for a long time, but, but we had been in the periphery of each other's life. He was married. Yeah. And then he got divorced. And then, at some point ran into each other. He asked me out. So that's why it was so weird to me and magical that, like, oh my God, I'm engaged now. Because he wasn't in the group ever. And I will tell you that I wasn't supposed to tell him what was going on.
No, I was going to say, Tuesday, Thursdays, and a week, every other weekend or whatever it was. One of the people I helped was engaged and wouldn't tell. And they were like, why don't you tell? Well, this is my own artistic thing. I need to do this. Please forgive me, but this is what I really... And it went on and on and on until he realized he was in a mind control cult, and the whole balloon burst.
I hope he didn't lose his relationship.
No, he didn't. I haven't been into... I mean, I'll tell you briefly, the story was that I was hired to help somebody in the city yoga cult. And I always do a family meeting to prepare, and I meet with the siblings and the other people in the family. And the brother said, can I talk to you privately later? And then he's, because he read Combating Cult Mind Control, and he said, I think I may be in a cult. And I was like, do tell. And then I was like, oh, I know this group. And anyway, so helping his sister and mother get out helped him get out, and then he told his fiance, and happily ever after, I hope. I haven't talked to them in a really long time, but
okay, but at least if they broke up, it wasn't because of that.
Oh, definitely not. But a healthy marriage, you should pretty much be transparent with your spouse about where you're going and where you're spending money and time. And
for sure.
Big red flag.
Big red flag. And actually, I broke the rules right away because we did talk about it. And I did tell him, in fact, we used to call it Tuesday, Thursday thing. I was like, I'm off to thing tonight. And he'd be like, okay, see you after thing. And, Steve, I mean, okay, this is organic, so I'm going to go off on this tangent. But after I left, it was one of those things where I realized, okay, not only do can I swear on this?
Definitely.
Do they fuck with the members, but they are taking advantage of the trust, that family members or friends, people that love these people have, because when I told Chris about this weird group, he said, look, if it's helping you, it's not my business, right? He's being respectful.
Right.
But, eventually, coming on year 4.5, 5, suddenly, Chris is becoming a problem. But that's pretty standard fare, right? Like your husband, blah, blah, blah,
You mean the group was critical of your husband?
Yeah.
Blaming your husband?
Yeah. Specifically the group leader. So, it really was just kind of this glut of starting this class and then getting excited. And then there's the first Christmas party, and that's exciting, and then I get a job and I'm like, oh my God, I'm finally growing up. I'm in my 40s. I have a job and a boyfriend, and we're engaged now, and, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 years in is when the tables start to turn, right? The love bombing's over. I also had a number of personal things, like my dad died, my grandma died,
Yeah, that's traumatic.
Yeah.
Life altering.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think Chris and I got married in 2009, and we go on our honeymoon. And I think when we got back, it was like, okay, the party's over. The love bombing's done. And, at that point, I'm pretty fully indoctrinated with a little tiny piece of inner skeptic going, there's something wrong with this. Again, I never lost touch with it. Thank God. Because I think
great.
Yeah, I think that's why I didn't last more than 5 years. And, you know, this was also, this was around the time that the economy started tanking too. I lost the job, and plus I hated the work that I was doing, so I was sucking at the jobs.
Uh-huh. That always is a thing.
Yeah. So, clearly I'm feeling worse and worse and worse about myself, and that's being reinforced by the group.
Right.
And then my functioning, I felt my mind felt shredded. I felt like I couldn't think.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, my husband is getting more and more concerned. My friends are like, "Are you okay?" Most of my friends didn't know about it. Chris is really the only person who knew about it. But my friends were like, "What is happening to you?"
Right.
And I'm trying to. Oh, so the final straw. I'm trying to get to the thing that pushed me out.
Sure.
Is Chris finally found some information online, and he brought it to my attention in the most intelligent way. First he found the stuff online, and then he found the name Odyssey Study Group. And then he went to my checkbook, because all this time, don't ask me why they were taking checks from me. It seems a little bit like stupid narcissism if you don't want to get caught bilking someone. But he went to my checkbook and he saw that I'd been writing checks, $350 a month, right, to OSG.
Yep.
So one night after class, we're like nodding off, and he suddenly said, "I have a confession to make." And he said, "I found this information online. I went to your checkbook." He said, "What is OSG?" I said, "I don't know." I had never asked. Not once. And then he said, no, wait, here, let me rewind this. He said, "What is Odyssey Study Group?" And I said, "I don't know." And I was rolling my eyes at that point. And then he said, "How about OSG?" And then I suddenly woke up. It was one of those moments where I was like, why have I not ever asked them what OSG stands for?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Here I am giving them my money. They're not telling me what these initials are.
Mm-hmm.
And then he told me he found the information, all the complaints about the crazy parties, and, spouses who are like, "I'm losing my partner to this group." And at that point, honestly, I think I was looking for a savior, right? I was looking for somebody to say, "What are you doing?"
Sure.
And he said to me, "Are you sure you're not being manipulated?" And I couldn't answer the question because deep inside I knew that I was, right? So it was kind of a rough weekend. I couldn't sleep all weekend. And then finally, with a lot of back and forth, over voicemail / of course they have my phone number, but I have to leave messages, which was kind of to my advantage after I left.
Right.
I finally had the big talk with Robert and said, "I can't continue. This is going to ruin my marriage." He tried two tactics. This was kind of funny, Steve. On the one hand, he went after Chris. He was like, "Your husband's going to keep manipulating you." And I, at that point, had woken up enough that I was like, anyone who meets my husband for 2 seconds knows that it's just not his thing.
Right. He's a good guy.
He, put up for 5 years with this weird group lurking in the background. What are you talking about? Know? And then when Robert saw that wasn't working, he shifted gears really fast, and suddenly he put on the face and the voice. He's like, "I'm trying to put myself in your husband's shoes." And I have to tell you, at that moment, I was like, I thought you were supposed to be Mr. Evolved.
Right.
That was it for me.
Yeah.
So 5 years I'm out. And after I left, for me, it was like an avalanche of realizations. And I understand, like, that's not the case for everyone. But for me, like, the longer I was out and the more distance I had from it, the more I put together the dots. And then I read your books. My Lifton book is falling apart. It's the binding.
Right.
And then I started telling everyone because I was so angry, about the secrecy.
Yep.
And then the blog went up, and then it became a presentation, and the songs. All of this is my recovery, right? This is where the art comes in.
Yeah.
And then at some point, somebody was like, I think your blog could be a book. And, here it is.
Yay.
Yeah, yay.
Buy Esther Friedman's book.
Yes, please
and
do.
I love the gentle souls revolution. Can I be a gentle soul?
Absolutely. I know I said to you, I'd really like to talk about this because I feel like this is a profile of person who is overlooked a lot. And I definitely fit this profile. And this is a profile of person who is vulnerable, because when you grow up and you're so empathic that you're picking up all the vibes in the room and you don't even know who's feeling what, you're like, is it me that feels angry? Is it me that's terrified? And everyone in your life is telling you that you're too sensitive or that you think too much. You don't grow up with confidence. This is why at 41, I was floating around feeling lost, and my message has become, there's nothing wrong with you, and we need more sensitivity, more thoughtfulness in the world. And what you need to do is honor and value that and protect it fiercely.
Right.
Like, it is okay for you to say, that's not going to work for me.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, finding your voice and being assertive is critical to have boundaries. And you've heard of the Empathy Trap book, I assume?
I have not.
Oh.
That sounds like something I should read.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very empathic too. A lot of people who become therapists are high on empathy, and it makes us great therapists. But it also, unless we learn boundaries and understand how to navigate, we can burn out really fast. Especially working with cult survivors and trauma victims, it's a big deal. And basically, empathy, it needs to be reined in. And in many cases, compassion is the thing that should be, more the emotional connection rather than stepping into someone else's shoes, but be able to hear them and imagine what they're feeling based on what they're saying and how they're behaving.
Yeah.
So talk about your professional work and your songs and all this great stuff that you're doing.
Well, thank you. So, after I got out, I went back to human services, which is what I was in initially, but really much more focused on like, okay, I need to get my license. Because like any good addict, I was like, okay, now that I've figured this out, I'd like to help other people, right?
Sure.
Any good recovering addict, right? Because I don't know, if you've used that frame for cult membership, but it's just
not
another
really.
addiction.
I'm not. It doesn't resonate for me about addiction. I think of it more as a dissociative disorder than an addiction. But please continue. It's different for different people.
Yeah, and I kind of think both of those things come into play, but this false feeling of dependency on something that's hurting you, I see a parallel there. But really the thrust of my work is about reclaiming voice, because I think these groups do what I call cultic identity theft. They yank the you out of the you. They fill you up with some kind of a cog that's going to do the bidding of the group. And the recovery is reclaiming that. And a great deal of that is reclaiming voice, right? Like, let's strain the loaded language out and, or replace it or reclaim it, you know?
If I
So,
may, for my listeners who may not be familiar with Robert J. Lifton and his book Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, a study of brainwashing in China that came out in 1961, that's the book, Esther, you were saying is falling apart from having read it so many times. It was
mm-hmm,
pivotally important in my deprogramming and in my recovery. And loaded language is thought terminating cliches, things that are known in the group that are buzzwords that shut off any critical thinking and kind of compress complex reality into these terms. And part of the recovery is being able to name it. That's what a Cain Abel problem is, or a chapter 2 problem. Those are Mooney loaded terms.
yeah,
um, and rewire your brain to using the English language and
mm-hmm,
recover the robustness of the language and the subtlety of life experience, etc. So I just
yeah,
wanted to flesh out the loaded language thing. And with Scientology, they drill them to program themselves with all these loaded terms. So it's so
yeah.
hard for ex-Scientologists to, even when they exit, to get it out of their head because they're still thinking with those loaded words.
Yeah. And I also, I think that's a good point too, because it's really hard to, unless you get into some kind of recovery or you have some really wonderful friends or family members who will talk about this stuff with you, and who understand it. It's hard to know when those little memes are still wired into your brain.
Mm.
So, you know, I really put the focus on authentic voice, authentic self.
Me too.
And yeah,
Go
and
ahead. Keep going.
it's really so rewarding when you
Definitely.
see when you see someone reclaiming that voice, or reclaiming their emotions. Um, and all I have to do is hold the space for that.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, Esther, I put together a course to train clinicians and other people, and I included a video of a session I was doing teaching Judith Herman's class on cults, and a former client of mine who is a very talented artist who had been in a Bible cult for 13 years and then out for 11 years in and out of psych hospitals on 19 different medications. And when and Laura heard that I was doing this training, she said, "Please let me come. I want to tell the clinicians all the mistakes people were making with me for 11 years."
Yeah.
And I'll just say, because you are an artist, this woman worked for Disney as an illustrator. I mean, she was an incredible artist, and she was doing these incredible satanic red, black things. And
Mm-hmm.
we put it up on in the slideshow. And she said, my therapist said, "That's dark. Why don't you draw something nice?" Instead of saying, "Wow, you're really artistic. Tell me more about what
Yeah.
is coming out of you."
Yeah.
And one reason I'm especially grateful to you as an expressive arts therapist is how valuable it is, because cognitive therapy for a lot of people doesn't do it. Like,
Yeah.
they need that musical, artistic,
Mm-hmm.
psychodrama. They need other expressions to externalize what
Yeah.
they went through so that they can heal themselves.
Yeah, and it's another way of reclaiming voice. Like a painting is a different kind of voice, right?
Yes.
It's also very concrete, which I'm taking tons of trauma continuing ed courses right now, and that's where all the treatment is going. Like being present, being in your body. The and I think, look, I joke around and call my experience cult light, but any cultic experience I think is traumatic because it's so bizarre when you realize that there are people in the world who are that cruel
Yeah.
and selfish.
Yeah. And, it's comparing your experience with someone else's experience. It's a mixed bag, because I
Yeah,
wasn't beaten and tortured and thrown in a hole for years,
yeah,
but I nearly died in a van crash. I was almost strangled with a garrote while I was out fundraising, had a knife
Jesus.
put to my stomach while I was out fundraising. I had a lot of traumatic experiences that as a cult member, I couldn't process until after I got out and went like, that was
Right,
really scary. That
right,
was
right.
really crazy. I was really lucky to live through that one. But the bottom line
Yeah,
is I would say you were in a cult and you survived, and you're making, more than lemonade because you're helping other people make their own lemonade out of their experiences, right?
yeah. That's the hope. I mean, that's my mission. The ironic thing is I found what I was looking for by leaving, right? Like I went in because I was feeling lost and, like I need to feel like I have a purpose and this group is going to
Hmm.
give me a purpose. And it did, but only because I left and looked at it and said, oh my God, what the fuck have I been doing? And
Yeah, I
what?
would say the group didn't give you the purpose. You found your purpose. And
Yeah.
so I want you to own that one. And I'll just add, if you don't mind, I interviewed Lifton recently for a book of his that's coming out in September on the importance of survivors and the
Hmm.
importance of resilience and how we can learn from people who've gone through these horrific experiences and use
Yeah.
it to show that we can get through all of this. They got through the nuclear bomb exploding in their city and wiping almost everybody out. You can do this too through the pandemic, through being in cults, etc. So it was a beautiful interview,
Yeah.
and he's still very functional, even though he's in his mid-90s.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to read that book because I do feel that not enough is written about recovery. There's a lot of memoir, and trust me, I welcome every single memoir.
Yep.
I want people to say, you know what, yeah, this happened to me. And I'm writing this. Most people who write memoirs, it's like I'm writing this so you can see the red flags, right? To
Mm.
educate. But I do feel like let's talk about recovery, reclamation,
Yeah.
because once I once I decided I'm not going back, I have never experienced so much freedom in my life. Suddenly I was like, oh, I'm telling everyone. I'm telling everyone because I'm not keeping these secrets.
Right.
They hurt me and
Right.
they protect you. So
No, exactly. People who've lost their freedom, once they get it back, wow, is it precious.
yeah, absolutely.
Whoa. You don't
Yeah.
take it for granted anymore.
Yeah, every minute, you know, get up, make a cup of coffee. I'm like, oh, I can write in my journal and no one's going to be calling me, expecting me to like go to the 7 a.m. early recruitment meeting.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I remember when I first got out of the Moonies, in the very first few weeks, I was like, I don't have to ask permission to take a nap. I don't need to ask permission to go to the bathroom. or or I
yeah,
want to go to the beach and watch the ocean waves. I don't need to ask permission from anybody. Whoa.
yeah, isn't that crazy when you think about it? I got together with one of my fellow disgruntled ex students, as we are called,
Yeah.
and we were laughing because there was at one point when we were both in the group, that we ran into each other in Harvard Square in a bookstore, and she said hi to me, and she was like a newer student, as we were called, and I said hi, and she said, oh, we aren't supposed to be talking, are we? And I was like, no, we aren't, but it's okay. And then we got together and I had lunch or something, and we were like, can you believe we thought that was normal and we were okay with that?
Yeah,
you
and you
know
were like, we're not supposed to be talking. Fuck that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, was another thing I think maybe specific to this group, because we weren't living on a compound, but we weren't supposed to acknowledge each other outside
Right.
of the group because we were in the invisible world,
Right.
So, um,
No,
but yeah,
exactly. And I've been talking with a fellow Fielding graduate who um, um, was involved with Heaven's Gate and evaluating the property there. So I've been like re-immersing myself in Heaven's Gate stuff. And they talked about being students. So as you're talking about students, I can't help but think about those poor souls who were convinced that they were actually aliens, in human bodies, and that they were going to evacuate to a spaceship in the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet because the Earth would be incinerated. And
yeah,
it's like, and they were smart, educated, wonderful people,
yeah, and
and
I
they're no
think
longer alive.
right, and it's a really good example of, human beings are influenced by others. We are social creatures,
Yep.
and me believing that I shouldn't be talking to my fellow students is a small example of believing crazy shit,
Yep.
but then it starts to grow, and it can grow into something as tragic as that.
Yeah, and I might say you might stop calling ex-members students. You might just call them former cult member friends of yours.
Yeah,
That's a little tweak, just
yeah.
from my ears. Um, but so you went to Leslie College. You got a master's in expressive
Yeah.
therapies. Share with us some of the approaches that you are experienced with, that you help people in their healing.
Well, I got a master's in expressive arts therapy, which is this kind of conglomeration of all of the arts.
Okay.
So it's like maybe you maybe you use paint, maybe client uses paint, and then, well, let's take that painting and why don't you write a dialogue? Like, what is that part of the painting saying to the other part? And I don't do dance therapy, but if I did, a dance therapist would say, dance it out, you
Right.
know? From I have to say also with music, it's more listening. I think music is a really wonderful way to get people back to their former selves. Like,
Mm.
what's the soundtrack of your life? What music
Mm.
was important to you before this happened?
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I haven't done songwriting with other people. That's kind of funny. I think I've kept that as a personal thing, but I would if somebody was interested, because for me, it was so healing
Had you
to,
been a songwriter before?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
So you went
yeah,
back to your authentic self, and
yeah. I went back to my authentic self. I would say, the thing that was the most painful for me about being in this group is that I couldn't, I got to a point where I couldn't even write because my mind was so shredded. So, writing, I kept journals as a 4-year-old, you
mm,
know? So the process of journaling and writing my story and then songwriting was all about reclaiming that authentic voice.
mm.
And so, in a way, like for this population, it's like, well, whatever it takes, because it doesn't matter what I think works, client. It's
Right.
what do you gravitate to? What did you
Right.
gravitate to before you had this experience?
Right.
What would you like to reclaim?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might say I was a creative writing major at college, and so I wrote poetry and short stories. And then when I got recruited into the cult, I was told to demonstrate my loyalty to the cult and throw out my original poetry, which was like 400 pieces.
Wow.
And I got out of the cult, and because they wanted me to throw it out because that was the real me, and they didn't want me to read it or have
Yeah.
it as a reference point. Um, I did find a few that had been published after I got out, so I was able to read at least some things. But it took
Oh,
me about a
wow.
year after getting out because my mind was shredded too. I had read 2 to 3 books a week before the cult. I was like a bookworm type person. I love to learn. I love to read. And
Yeah.
I got out and I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't remember the meaning of words. I had to,
Wow.
um, I bought a dictionary and started like retraining my mind of what words meant.
Yeah.
And it took me about a year to start writing again. And guess what? It was when I started dating women again and falling in love, and love didn't work out. And then it started, priming the pump. And then I was started
Right.
writing about being in the cult a bit, et cetera, et cetera. And then, later, when Jonestown happened and everything, I just went nonfiction writing and just like more serious stuff and put that aside. But hanging out with you and Jarrett Bullion at the ICSA conference and
Hmm.
just like, I think I might be able to reactivate my voice. And I'm
Yeah.
actually taking a week off and I'm going to try to unplug and let's see if something wants to come out
Yeah. I
because,
was going to ask you if you
yeah.
had reclaimed the poet, you know?
Yeah, I wrote a bunch of poems for years when I first got out, but what I wanted to highlight was agreeing with you. My mind was like shredded and I had to. And one thing that a therapist said to me that was very helpful, she said, the mind is like a muscle, Steve. Think about if you break your arm and it's in a cast, when it comes out of the cast, you're weak. You don't have the same strength.
Yeah.
You just need to keep working it and it
Yeah.
will come back. It'll get strong. And that was such a hopeful message to me. Oh, my
Yeah.
mind's like a muscle. I'm going to exercise it and I'm going to do more weights. And I just started forcing myself to read a page and explain what was it that I just read. And then I'll read
Mhm.
2 pages and then I'll read a chapter. And I built myself back up to, reading a bunch of books and just, I still love to learn. That's part of what juices me is
Yeah.
curiosity and just a hunger to
Yeah.
try to understand this experience on earth that's happening.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that the Moonies telling you to give up your poetry, that is classic identity theft right there, right? Like,
Totally.
yeah.
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 And they used the Abraham was asked to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac story.
Yeah.
And so what do you love the most, Steve? And I said, I don't know. And they're like, well, we think your poetry is your Isaac. Are you willing to sacrifice
Yeah.
your Isaac? And so they manipulated me.
Oh God, it's so infuriating.
Yeah, well, all I can say is part of what I teach my clients, in reclaiming their authentic self is, be in the now, be in your body, have an internal locus of control, have a positive future orientation, learn about mind control, have a toolbox for discerning who to trust, who not to trust, and how to
Hmm.
figure that out. But then I have people do that mental exercise of going back to key moments that were really traumatic or key in your recruitment and answer the question, if I knew then what I know now, what would I
Yeah.
do differently? So I'm back in that scene and they're telling me about Isaac and they're, go get your poems and throw it out. And I get my poems and I walk out the door and I flip them a bird,
Perfect.
right?
Yep.
Because I
Yeah.
never would have thrown out my poetry. It was like
Yeah.
creativity for me was the essence of being human. It was like
Right.
what distinguished us from the animals was that we could create. But I needed to reclaim that the real me would never have thrown out my poetry.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so heinous. But look at what you've done since, right? Speaking of someone who took their experience and
Yeah, it's been a
yeah.
very interesting life, and who thought I would be doing this 47 years later? Like
Yeah.
I thought I would be murdered or I'd burn out a long time ago. And I have burned out a lot of times, but I
Yeah.
just get so much fulfillment from helping people and feeling
Yeah.
like I matter and I make a difference. And the cult of Trump has just like off the charts been important
Yeah.
and will be important for years to come.
Yeah. And
Uh,
that's so scary right now. I'm glad that you're taking, putting the spotlight on that.
Well, unlike your cult, my cult wanted to take over the government and thought democracy was satanic and should infiltrate and
Mm.
destroy, the separation of church and state. And my former cult was at January 6th, and my former cult has a gun factory with a
Yeah.
rod of iron, ministry where they're saying, well, let's train everyone with assault rifles for the Civil War to come. So my former cult is still very present. So I really feel like I can't just say, well, I've done enough now. I'm gone. Because
Yeah.
I know I have this historical knowledge and memory
Yeah.
that's very unique. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to put out as much content as I can and do interviews. And this woman, Pam Hemphill, by the way, Esther, just surfaced recently. She had been sentenced to 2 years in jail for January 6th. And she's on the media holding up the cult of Trump saying, I was brainwashed. Read this book. So,
Really?
yeah, it's fabulous. It's happening right now. And I'm just hoping it might inspire other people who are having doubts about their involvement with the extremists, right wing, and the GOP, and all the Russian influenced politicians who are trying
Yeah.
to subvert our freedom and such. But back to you as we're wrapping up. You have a blog, you have music and CDs, you have
Hmm.
a book. Say a little bit more, and then when we do the blog, we'll add links so people can come
Okay.
and all that good stuff.
Yes. So there are actually two sites. One is my professional site is thegentlesouls.revolution.com. So
Great.
if you're interested in therapy, that's the one to go to. If you're interested in just hearing me, tell my story and vent, you could go to cultconfessions.com.
Okay. Awesome.
I have the book, The Gentle Souls Revolution. The music at this point is, there are some projects in the works there
Great.
where, a collaboration with Jarrett.
Jarrett's the executive director now of IGotOut.org. So again, we're trying to normalize and destigmatize the fact that good people can be lied to and co-opted and programmed into these crazy belief systems and cults. And there's life after cult. And Jarrett in particular likes to encourage people to write their narrative. And I believed in that since 1988 when I wrote Combating. I said, write out your story because you
Yeah.
get to have perspective. And
Yeah.
oh, that's the younger me. I was this. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
helpful.
She is writing workshops, in fact, for those who
Yes.
are interested in that. So I would say there is a CD called Cult Confessions. That's the soundtrack to my misadventure. Most of my music now is kind of like, please let me think about something else.
Got it. Great.
Yeah, but there are other projects which bring the music in that are kind of unformed right now. So to be determined.
That's awesome. Well, thank
Yeah.
you for being you, and thank you for speaking out, and thank you for being a therapist and caring and wanting to help other people on their journey reclaim their authentic self. And continued success.
Thank you. And thank you for having me and for all the work you've done over the years to combat this.
Yeah, my pleasure. My honor. I'll take care now.
All right.
Steve Hassan here. It's been decades since my family rescued me from the Moonies. I've been at this for over 47 years. The need has never been greater. If you're able, please consider hitting the Super Thanks button below, and it'll help us to do better. Every penny will help us toward our goal of educating the planet about undue influence. Remember, it's your mind, only you should control it.